today, Sarah needs me to stop talking because she's got loads to go through. We are talking about progression possibilities. I have a few things to talk about before Sarah is going to get into the models that we brought to life on the podcast. So whether you listened this week or you haven't had a chance yet, don't worry, because we're going to bring to life lots of what we talked about. I was listening back to it and thinking, oh, this would be really helpful if we kind of illustrated this and drew it out just to make it even more practical for people. So that's what we're going to do. Question for you before we get started then. I just want to kind of get us into this mindset of progression. How has your career progressed in the last 12 months? So over the last year, just head into chat and let us know. I mean, you might maybe pause for thought, but how has your career progressed in the last 12 months? It's a pretty big question. Carolina.
Lucy, congratulations. Got a new job in January. That's exciting.
It's super exciting. So one type of progression there, new job. Brilliant interim role. Tourist guide to office manager. We do love a super squiggly move. That's amazing. Georgie, promotions. That's another one there. Started to work more cross-functionally. I love that, Steve. So maybe kind of an expansion in role. And I think that's positive. Progressed really well. Transferred to a new department. Oh, I love the challenge, but feeling overwhelmed now. If you haven't found a podcast to help you, let us know. We can give you one. Might help.
Zoe, thank you for being honest and saying you feel like you're not really progressing, and that's felt really frustrating. I really hope what we're going to talk through today will really help to find a way to kickstart that progression or feel like you can take a bit more control of it. But thank you for sharing that, because like you say, sometimes it does feel like you are stalling rather than squiggling.
Yeah, nice term, Sarah. Helen, loving a bit of Tropic skincare. I am a fan. I think that's body scrub. New role, unexpected new role. I quite like that, how sometimes progression isn't predictable. Like it's kind of unexpected. It's great. Coaching, Shima. So actually kind of maybe you're progressing in terms of your self-awareness. Loads of things here. Brilliant. Okay, I think we should keep coming back to these because there are some great examples here which can bring to life some of the things that Sarah's going to talk about. So that's kind of great. We're in a bit of a progression mindset for ourselves in our career. A couple of things to talk about before Sarah gets into the how. I read this book this morning. This book is, well, I mean, it's a report. It's 116 pages long. So it's halfway towards being a book, I think. It's really good. We will share the link with you. I will do it while Sarah's talking. It's a new report from Josh Bersin on employee experience. And there's quite a bit in there about career growth. Like I think there are 6 different elements that contribute to the employee experience. And one of the 6 is career growth. It basically says, squiggly careers are a good thing without saying squiggly careers, because Josh doesn't know as yet, but he will. And he says in the report, the number one reason top performers leave organizations, we probably all know this, but basically lack of growth opportunity. And I think that's interesting because sometimes when we look at growth in quite a singular way, we might say, I can't grow here. But when we look at growth in quite a squiggly way, if you look at a lot of the things that you have shared, actually, there is quite a lot of opportunity to grow. I'm not saying that it's never right to leave a company, but I think we have to really see what is all of the growth and progression possibility we can squeeze out of an organization before we kind of dismiss it in terms of our development. Also, really interesting that I found in the report, some age implications of progression, quite interesting. It says kind of lots of research shows that when you start out in your career, it's sort of upwards mobility that is their priority for a lot of people, where it talks about when you've kind of slightly more tenured, it doesn't actually give an approximate number of years of experience, but as you become more experienced, it talks about goal alignment becoming more important. So when you're looking at your progression possibilities, you're less focused on it just being upwards, and you're more interested in how does that progression possibility align with the other things that I might want to do in my life, which I thought was interesting because we work with organizations. Yesterday I was with working with a company with their interns, and that would imply that this is kind of more of a priority for them than some other groups that we work with. Just kind of interesting. Again, as always, stuff to support you on this topic. We've got the pod sheet, which is sort of like the downloadable tool to drive your reflections. It's got summaries of the things Sarah's going to talk about. And then the super quick swipeable one here, all on amazingif.com. And if you want to go further into this topic after today, if you're like, I really want to deep dive into progression, 3 other things that we would recommend listening to. This episode with Sophie Williams, which is about progression inequality, which I think just dives into some specific progression challenges that exist in the workplace that I don't think we can ignore. So particularly for women and also marginalised groups in the workplace. It's a good listen. Career vision. So we talked a long time ago, I don't even know what year that would have been, 2018, about how to create a vision for your career. So I think sometimes if you're trying to unlock your thinking, career visions can help, and that's one thing. And then I spoke to Marie Forleo, who's like a super shiny person, super shiny. She's got lots of nice advice, and that was episode 103 about how to figure out your future. She'd written a book called Figure Outable, and she talked about a few different things there that might help. So just a few different listens to add into the mix. But Sarah, I'm now giving you 22 minutes to share everything.
Thank you. Right, okay. So what we thought we would do is, and hopefully this will be useful whether you've listened to the podcast or not, is go through the 4 stages that we talked through in terms of how to think about your progression possibilities. And if you've listened, hopefully this reinforces but also visualizes the 4 stages. And if you're new to it and you've not listened this week, then hopefully we're introducing you to these ideas. And as I go through, I thought we'd kind of try and complete it together. So we've almost had a go at this very quickly in circa 21 minutes. But just so you know what the 4 stages are, so you kind of know where we are, and I will summarize at the end. We're going to start by talking about how do you just explore all of your possibilities. So this is really at the stage where we're trying to feel unconstrained. We really don't want to limit ourselves. We're being really kind of as creative as we can be about all the different possibilities to progress that we can think of. So we'll have a go at that together in a minute. And we've already got lots of examples from the question that Helen asked. So we start off by exploring. We then go into prioritizing. So of all the things that we know are interesting, are ways that we could progress, which ones feels like our priority right now? And Helen will be delighted to know I have included the 2x2 matrix, which we didn't talk about on the podcast. It's quite hard to do a matrix on a podcast, but we have got in our next book. So I thought I'd try it out with you this morning. I'm then going to talk about prototyping. So once you know, this is the kind of most important progression for me right here, right now, how do you then make that happen? And again, not thinking in too much of a, oh, it can only happen in one way. How can you prototype it to make it happen and kind of take control, I guess, of that progression that's important to you? And then the last one we're going to talk about is how do you signal the support that you need? So if those first 3 stages are really about you, it's also recognizing that other people have a really important part and role to play in your progression. So you might be at any of these 4 stages, and I've very intentionally done it as a circle because I think this is a continual process. I don't think this ever stops. So you might be thinking, well, I'm here, I already know exactly what progression I'm looking for, I just need to figure out how to make it happen. Or perhaps you're very much up here and you're just thinking, I just want to explore how I can progress. I'm not really sure what that looks like for me right now. So they're the 4 stages. So let's go through it and do stage 1. So the way that we visualize this is thinking about, because this is all about exploration, and actually space feels very topical right now, doesn't it? With people disappearing off into space, Richard Branson making his way to space, Helen's previous employer. We want to, I suppose, think about this really as about what can we discover? What is the art of the possible? And so if you're in the middle, if Planet You are in the middle, we want to think about what are just all the different ways that you could explore progressing. And so let's head into chat now and just try and come up with as long a list as possible as we can about what progression could look like. And I think we've got 5, 10 when we've done this, we came up with 15. So let's see. And we've already seen some. I'm going to write some that I've already seen. So I've already seen promotion.
As they come in, all the different progression possibilities, everyone. Job shadowing.
Yeah, great.
Secondment.
Lovely.
New skills.
Yeah.
New community.
Okay, great. So like a new network or...
Yeah.
People to learn with, yeah.
Volunteering.
Yeah, brilliant.
King, Tanya and Nita all saying new project at the same time. I love it.
Yeah.
Full career change. So I guess that's maybe like a pivot, maybe.
Yeah, I'll put career change. That makes sense. Yeah.
Buddying. Lots of volunteering. Oh, that's a trustee role, which is kind of like a specific development role. Being a mentor or a coach.
Yeah.
I guess learning qualifications. So kind of maybe it's sort of expertise. New boss. Taking a career break. I love that.
Yeah, great one.
Brilliant article this week from somebody who was basically saying they were just pausing before they were. Lots of people were saying like, "What next? What next?"
I read that.
So, Jodie Cook.
Find that article. It was Jodie, wasn't it? I read it and just thought it was really well articulated.
Me too.
Why it's important to sometimes press pause in your career. Job crafting. Love that. I'm now panicking that there's going to be really good ones here that we've not included
in our book.
And I'm thinking, is there going to be space for me to? I'm going to have to do a cross check after this. Really conscious learning. Okay, great. So I suppose the point of us doing this, firstly, is could someone, of course, Sarah. So job crafting is essentially taking the role that you do today and thinking about how you could rescope or redefine that role in some way, so that usually it gives you either new opportunities to learn or perhaps more opportunity to use your strengths. Now, that role redefinition, that can sound really dramatic, but a job crafting could just be spending 5% more of your time on a certain project, or just volunteering for one thing for your team that you just think, oh, I'd really like to get involved in that. And that's a way to do it. So it's staying in the same job, but something changes, and it could be a 1, 2, 3% change, or it could be a 50% change, but you're fundamentally still in the same role, probably still in the same team. Hope that helps. So what we've done here, stage 1, and if you're thinking about your progression, I'd really encourage you to do this, because I reckon there are probably even more that we've not covered here, is just think about all the ways that you can progress. And of course, we know that progression is more than promotion. What we don't mean, though, is that promotion doesn't matter. I think sometimes it's easy to mistake what we're saying, perhaps for saying, oh, because we sort of talk about getting rid of the ladder and moving away from being too focused on only one direction, that we don't believe in promotions, which is absolutely not true. I think there are times where promotions are really important, depending on what you want to do. It's just understanding that that's just one way that you can progress. So you go, right, okay, I've got loads of ideas here about how I can progress in my career, how I can keep growing. And when you do this exercise for yourself, the one thing that sometimes happens is our inner critic kicks in. So we start to say to ourselves, oh, but I couldn't do that, or that's not going to be possible in my organization, or that scares me. And at this stage, I'd really encourage you to turn down the volume on your inner critic, or kind of almost the practicalities of how this might happen, and just go for as many things as you can. We're all about quantity at this point, as many as you can get to. So that's step 1. Now you've got to those, these are all your, we call them like your planets of possibilities. It's now thinking about, okay, well, which ones of these, and there might be a couple, there might just be one, which feel like the priority for me right now. So I think an important coach yourself question to start with here, and for people who are new, that's just coach yourself question. That's a little shorthand for coach yourself question. The first question to ask yourself is a why question. So why is progression important for me? Why is progression meaningful and motivating for me? And we all actually answer that question in slightly different ways, depending on our values, what matters to us about the work that we do. But often when we're thinking about progression, we're very focused on the what. You know, that's what we've just done. We've just done loads of what's. Like, what are all the ways that you can progress in your career? We've just answered that question. And just before we get into then how are we going to make that happen, it's just worth kind of, this is slightly a kind of press pause and a bit more deeper reflection. Why does progression matter to me? Maybe it's because you think, I'm just really curious and I'm someone who really loves to learn. Maybe it's because you think, I want to increase my influence and my impact in the work. I'm really passionate about the work that I do, and I want to increase my influence. maybe progression is important to me because I actually want to explore something new. I want to go in a new direction. And the answer to this question can change. You don't have to feel anchored to the answer like forever. It's, why is progression important to you at the moment? I would try and do this kind of in the here and now, because I would have had moments in my career where my progression was important because I did want to increase my influence, or because I wanted to try out a new career and do something different in a different department, a different role. And that would be different to now, where I think about, well, why is progression important to me now? I think I'd think, I want to learn as much as I possibly can so I can do the best job I can of kind of helping people with their careers. It'd probably be like, how can I learn the most to deliver on my kind of mission in terms of making careers better for everyone? So just think about that why question. Quite useful to have some thoughts on that. And then you can use this matrix to start to plot of all those progression possibilities, which feel like the priority for you right now. So the scale that we're using here, this one here is about energy. And this one is about fit with your why. I'm just going to put that there as a reminder, which is why we need to answer that question first before we can do the diagram. So energy is when you start to think about these progression possibilities, it's almost like, how excited do you get? How energized do you feel by that possibility? Or does it start to feel like maybe something you feel like you should do, or other people have done it, so that's why it's kind of on that list? And then that fit is this point about, does it feel really meaningful and motivating for you? And when you start to plot these, so you plot where they sit for you, this can help to give you a steer about where you should put your energy and effort. So if something is in this box here, so it gives you get quite excited about it, potentially gives you quite a lot of energy when you think about it, but there's low fit. This really is what we call kind of the shiny objects. This is maybe where you think you might get the short-term satisfaction, but is it really going to give you the long-term meaning and motivation? And it's just about questioning, like, is this definitely the right way of progressing for you? This is where sometimes we think, well, I should go for a promotion because that's what's expected of me, or I should go and work for a brand that people have heard of because that just feels better than working maybe for a startup, whatever it might be. But just be wary of those things that kind of feel energizing on the surface, but perhaps don't have the substance underneath, is kind of the way. And I've made loads of progression decisions based on these in the past, and it never works out. It's never been ultimately a useful learning experience for me, or the right way of progressing. This is sometimes where we get into progressing for the wrong reasons rather than the right reasons. This one down here is a kind of relatively obvious one. If it's a progression possibility that doesn't give you any energy and it doesn't fit with why you want to progress, don't do it. And that might sound really basic, but I've certainly had situations in my career where people have talked to me about progression possibilities proactively and said, Sarah, we'd really like you to consider doing this, or what about this role? And it would have been really easy for me to say yes and kind of get into like people pleasing, because that's what people were offering me. And I realized that those roles wouldn't give me energy and they weren't a good fit. So actually it does sometimes take confidence and having that clarity to be able to say no to the things that are not right. These ones down here, we kind of call, they're quite hard. We call them kind of the hard to do's, hard to do, I'm just going to put. And these are hard because you don't naturally kind of have the energy. Maybe it's not really obvious how you're going to make it happen. Perhaps it just feels hard, but it also feels important. And perhaps it's not really a but, perhaps it's hard and important. So this doesn't mean that you don't take action on it. It's probably more recognizing that it might take time, that you might need some extra support for this one. So that might be something like, let's imagine, for me, when I really wanted to do an MBA, for example, you know, that's a really big deal and they're really expensive. And I've got to convince an organization to sponsor me through doing that. And that took a lot of time. And I had to figure that out over years. That was a kind of a hard to do progression where it was like, I knew it was important to me, so it got a good fit, but I knew I was also going to have to bring energy to it. It wasn't going to happen overnight. So it's kind of a hard to do one. And then these up here are your priorities in terms of certainly in your short term they give you energy, you get excited about it, and you feel like it's a really good fit for kind of what matters to you. And as always, these always use, I think, a matrix, and I'm not a natural matrix user, unlike Helen. I always think use these matrix to give you just insights, to further your awareness about, from all of those different options that are available to you, which ones are the right ones for you. That's the outcome that you're trying to get to here. What feels right, what feels interesting, what feels like a really good fit for you, versus comparing yourself to other people or just kind of following in other people's footsteps. This is really about taking ownership about, how do you want to progress? What do you want your squiggle to look like? Then you move into prototyping. And when we talk about prototyping, often what we do when we're thinking about our progression is we start here. We think about what progression is important to me, so what ended up in that priority list, and then we go straight into, and how do I make that happen? And if we do that, we often come up with one option. We come up with a really obvious option as to how to make that progression happen. If, however, we write down both what the progression is that we want to happen, and we write down the why will unlock lots more options, lots more ways that you can start progressing. So for example, let's use the promotion one. What I want to get promoted in my career. If you then just go into prototyping how here, you just go to, well, the how is just getting promoted. And that might happen, that might not happen. Some of that might be out of your control. You might have to wait for a job to come up, all those kind of things. If your what is, I'd like to get promoted, and your why is, because I really like developing people. I'm really motivated by developing other people. So I'd like to lead a team where I can practice that and that be a bigger part of my role. It's like, okay, so your why is about, let's say, developing people. Now, one way, one how that you can prototype that is, of course, getting promoted. But let me know in chat, how else could you start prototyping that progression possibility of developing people other than getting promoted? Let's see whether we can answer that question. Yeah, brilliant, Sophia. Yeah, mentoring, shadowing.
People.
Oh, you guys are all so good.
Sharing resources and reading. Yeah. I love that one because it's kind of lower, it's like lower touch. Good way to get started.
So you get the point straight away. And these are meant to be little post-its, by the way, in case it's not clear. But I think this is genuinely a really good post-it note activity. Like, get your post-it notes out, almost like create a wall of, here are all my possibilities. You could then take the post-it notes and put them onto a 2x2 matrix, and then you could almost start to create and how are all the ways that I could prototype this. What this gets you to, I think, is creating rather than waiting for your progression possibilities to happen. Because there are always other factors, there are always other things outside of your control. And this helps you to get some momentum rather than feeling like I have to wait for this progression to come to me. I can create it for myself in loads of different ways. So this is all about prototyping, and this hopefully then prompts you to start taking action. And the last thing I just wanted to talk about is signaling the support that you need. 3 things to think about. The first is that your commitment creates commitment. So don't go and have, and I'm sure no one here would do this, but don't go and have those passive conversations with a manager or mentor where you just sort of expect the other person to do the hard work for you. And I think I've probably been guilty of this in my career, where you sort of kind of go to a manager, I want to learn this thing, like, help me do it. I expect you to sort this out for me on my behalf. I'm exaggerating for effect. But I think you showing that you have thought about this, that you have done some of the research, you've perhaps had some curious career conversations already, and you've really committed to thinking about your own progression, then that means you've got halfway there. We often talk about that when you're coaching yourself. Make sure you get halfway there before then you go and talk to those people that you would like some commitment and support from, because they will see that you've already put energy and effort into it. So just make sure you've kind of done some of this work first. You don't need to get all of the way there, get some of the way there, because I think the next point is equally important, which is about involve rather than always feeling like you have solve everything. So when you're thinking about progression, especially if it's something that you're not 100% in control of, the more you can involve people in, well, what ideas have they got? How can they see, how have they maybe done things in their career? What possibilities can they spot that perhaps you can't see? It's a really smart way to get people invested in you and your progression. Too many times in my career, I felt like I never did expecting other people too much, but I overthought things because I'm a real overthinker. So I would turn up to a meeting and I had like thought through everything, every eventuality, exactly how it was all going to work. And I wasn't involving, I was telling. And then that doesn't create the investment from the other person. And also you miss out on their wisdom and their ideas, and you limit your learning if you do that. So make sure that you are involving people in your prototyping, whether that's inside or outside of your organization. Doesn't have to be a manager. Can be, they're often the most obvious person, but doesn't have to be. And then I just wanted to also be realistic about rejection. Sometimes the progression possibility that we want to happen doesn't happen, or it isn't available. Or I think it was Zoe who's talked about, you know, maybe feeling a bit frustrated. Maybe you've tried really hard to make this stuff happen and it just doesn't feel like it's kind of going your way. I spoke to a brilliant guy called Adam Morgan. Too many
Adams. You wish you'd spoken to Adam Grant.
He never talked to me, but that's a conversation for another day. So Adam Morgan wrote a brilliant book called Beautiful Constraints. And what he talks about is, if you are in almost like a holding pattern, if you are having to wait and you can't make your progression happen in the here and now, how can you use that waiting time so that by the time your progression possibility is more realistic, you're in an even better position? So it's almost taking this waiting moment and viewing it really positively and really proactively. That can feel really hard, but what it helps you to do is keep your motivation and your energy in those tougher times where perhaps you're thinking, well, I would like to get promoted, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult right now. So use that waiting time. He talks about using this. He talks propelling questions, which I was like, where you start a sentence with, I can if. So if you're thinking about, okay, well, I can't get promoted right now, but if you think about your why, it's about developing people. I can develop my skills in developing people if I do X, Y, Z, which helps to get you back to those prototyping ideas. I'm going to try and get Adam Morgan on the podcast to really talk about this idea, because I think there's some brilliant stuff in there that he's shared with us. So to summarize, just about made it through. Start off with your possibilities. Think wide, don't constrain yourself. Figure out your priorities right now. Do some prototyping, and don't forget to signal the support that you need. Hopefully that makes sense. Any quick questions, like let us know in chat. These are recorded, but they are the kind of 4 stages that we feel are continually helpful in Squiggly Careers to help you with that progression that's important for you. Helen, I'm going to take a breath. Does that make sense?
Well done. Hooray. Well done. Also, everyone, it's a long way coming. It's got another 6 months to go, but there is a whole chapter on progression in the new book, because we think it's a really thing that we really wanted to focus on that we didn't cover in as much depth in the 5 skills. So yes, lots there too. That's coming soon. Well, you won't miss it. We'll talk about it a lot. So just maybe not quite yet. But hope you all have a good rest of your week. And what are we talking about next week? Oh, Dorie Clark, me. It said Pod Plus next week. I've talked to Dorie Clark, who is an American author and speaker, and we're talking about how to kind of reshape your role, reshape your career. So for the people that were asking about job crafting, it's a bit of a build on that. She's got quite an entrepreneurial approach to how you invest in your career. So that's the context of that conversation. But yes, we will see you all soon, everybody. Have a good rest of your week. We'll let you go. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.